And we're live. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us in yet another stream from Animation Pandemic. Today with us we have Francesca Pesce, who is lead compositor at BlueZoo.
And lighting.
And lighting. Sorry, I forgot about that. So Francesca, in fact, does a bit of everything, and lighting and comp being the main tasks. Sorry, Francesca, I didn't introduce you properly. And then Max, who's has just finished working on Cyberpunk 2077, will join us a bit later today, but he will join us. So remember that we stream live every Thursday at 5 p.m. UTC, unless something happens, that is. I guess something happened to Max today.
We find out if he can manage to join us.
We will find out when he joins. I think he
will.
Or
to open an investigation.
We will probably have to file for a missing 3D artist, but I think he'll join. He's supposed to be joining. So again, thank you very much again to those who joined, and we have online a few people. And good afternoon or good evening, everybody. Today's topic will be workplace and studio politics, and in fact, we are going to see whether workplace and studio politics are a thing in the animation industry as well. Are CG artists spared the pain of politics? I guess that would be a good question. And aptly, I think we could show on screen something there just to give us an idea of what's the topic for today. I wish I could open with the House of Cards intro and the music. I really like that intro. But I think that the YouTube AI would probably pull down my video in something like 5 seconds the moment I put something.
Might still be a bit dramatic for CG, but
maybe it's a bit too dramatic for CG as well. We don't move that much, I think, but yet. So another thing I think is, since we're going to talk about politics in the workplace, I think the talk will end up being probably bordering teamwork as well. I don't think the two things are separated. What do you think, Francesca?
No, they're not. In fact, like I think we watched the same videos about it. Like there was a video on YouTube that we actually watched about like the how dynamics works in and politics works in when you are in a company. And I think there was this really good point about that you're probably going to explain better than me. But the point being is that for your team to work, you need help from the outside the team. And the outside of the teams needs to collaborate with the inside of the team. So they all really, there is a synergy that you need to create within the studio, in and out your group, and also you have to make your group works, your team work, and being balanced, and create a good atmosphere, a place where people are willing to do their work, and with no suffering possibly. So there are some dynamics that you need to create. There's like also times where some people within your teams might be struggling a little bit in terms of like two people not getting along. Even things that seems really like high school topics, they're actually the same even when you work just a bit more hidden, but they're there, and they might create issues with the work and deliveries as well. So
yeah,
yes,
and I guess this stuff will come over and over. Oh, we have Max as well with some 3D
where are
guys
you?
in the background. Max, we filed for a missing 3D artist. Where were you?
Apparently, you were stolen by an apple. And
I was talking with my friends here back at school. Yes, I just found out about the new animated background. So I couldn't avoid not having them. But like, there you go. We go back to the old boring. I don't know. Let's go for this shit. Yes.
So Max, you joined right in time because we just discussed what's the topic for tonight. We anticipated that it's going to border into teamwork as well, because I don't think you can divide politics and teamwork really. And I think before starting, it would probably be a good idea to investigate a little bit the meaning of politics. So let's have a look at what politics means before we go any.
Max, I think you're disappearing though with this.
With the. And also,
Also, your audio disappeared.
it's because I muted you while you were checking your mic. So let's check the meaning of politics. So if I Google politics, the first result says the activities associated with governance of a country or area, especially the debate between parties having power. Activities, and the second definition is the activities aimed at improving someone's status or increasing power within an organization. So you can see there are two meanings in there, and one is more focused on a single individual than the other, I think. So I think politics can be seen in different ways, and in fact, when you talk about office politics, usually when you hear people talking about office politics, usually it's meant in a negative way, but I don't think politics are entirely negative. In fact, I think they are intertwined with the destiny of a company, and if you manage them properly, they are in fact a powerful tool to use. So let's have a look at the Cambridge Dictionary.
I would add that usually it's the negative aura that this term has when it's related to work is because mostly politics in work is associated with unfairness of treatment regardless of the skill of somebody. That's usually
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, although it doesn't have to be like that. I mean, there are lots of other things involved.
But that's a very subjective interpretation, right? It's you're raising your eyebrows quite a lot. So
me,
yeah, I think.
No, it's just the shadows. Let me. There we go.
So let's have a look at the Cambridge Dictionary. Politics is regarded as the activities of the government, members of lawmaking organization, or people who try to influence the way a country is governed. It's interesting that they mention who try to influence, because of course there is no certainty in the politics games, right? So, and then as a second explanation, we have the job of holding a position of power in the government. I think this is also a very interesting definition, because one could call politics just the job of holding a position of power, which is an interesting definition per se. I think it mirrors what Max was saying about the other point of view, right? The artists not seeing their skills recognized. Then we have one last thing. It's also the study of the ways in which a country is governed, if you think of it, and it's written down here. There you go. Now, one last definition, and then we can keep rolling. Definition of politics from the Merriam-Webster dictionary. It's the art or science of government. I like this one because it implies an understanding which is both methodical and also intuitive. So I really like this one. And then we have the art or science concerned with guiding or influencing governmental policy. This one was difficult. And finally, the art or science concerned with winning and holding control over a government. So winning and holding control, that's interesting. So that's it. We have our definitions. We know a little bit more about what politics really means, but in practice, on the inside of a company, politics is not always that visible, or is it? What do you think, guys?
You can perceive. It depends. Like if you just enter the company, I think it's not. I mean, having said that, no, you do notice it, because like from the first step you do, like you enter a company, you do an interview, you can have a hint of like the dynamics, who is in power, who you should ask. It's just even like when you need to know who to ask for really basic things, as like, what's my contract be, and maybe the HR replies, oh, I need to ask to this person, to the supervisor. So you already know there is like a hierarchy. And I think because in CG there is this structure, it's somehow it's implied. So if someone is a director, you know that maybe probably in the group it's going to be the highest position, and outside he might still hold a good position because he became director within the company.
At the same time, though, hierarchy is not the same as politics, and
it's
political,
quite close though.
It's quite close, but it's not the same, is it?
No, it's not the same.
I will give an example of why it's not the same. I think that these are two things that intertwine
Intertwined,
somehow. Yeah, because for example, let's say that I'm a junior artist and we are already short on people, and I'm asking for a raise. Uh, in that moment, I have a bigger role of power because if I leave, the studio would be in trouble. So in that moment, even if usually I'm not in a position of power, I get to become in a position of power because of the 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 moment, the situation, and that does not have anything to do with the hierarchy that will always put me at the bottom, being a junior, right? So I think it's that politics is actually the game that is played under the hood of the hierarchy. Otherwise, it would be extremely static. The hierarchy set. Uh, who takes decision is already decided. So why even bother? Why things shouldn't problems would not arise if hierarchy alone was enough to manage the studio.
Having said that, like there are moments where the structure of power is fairly static, and I think it's there are situations where I found myself that this was the case. So and it was and the structure that the hierarchy that was there, it was actually aligned with the distribution of power, which means like as you said, it can be a problem. So it can be really static and feel like nothing moves or moves in the or people are not heard. It definitely happens though. It's like if you have like a moment of where powers are flowing and changing, and this is a moment of big like innovation, and then as soon as like the people that were really good get into power, that becomes and there are no new power involved, it becomes a bit static, and that's the moment where probably it's a bit more difficult to innovate or create new idea flowing because the people in charge stay there. So there are different dynamic, I guess.
I agree with Max on this one. I think, in fact, I think that if politics and hierarchy would perfectly line up, if they were matching in a company, you're more likely to have a problem, in my opinion, than not.
Yeah, you do have problem.
Or you are in an ideal position. Everything works perfectly and the butterflies are flying in that company. But I don't think that's often the case. And to give an example of the discrepancy between the actual influence of someone in a company and their position in the hierarchy, I can reverse the example Max made, and I remember walking into a company on my first day, being introduced to the hierarchy, and there was someone who in a normal company would hold decisional power over everything that I would animate, anything that anybody would animate in the company, and I was told I was told in let's say, how do I call that, in non-mistakable terms that if I wanted my stuff to be approved, I was supposed to skip that person in power and never show them my work. I was also given a strategy to follow to make sure that my material would never get to the person in power, and it would instead go to another person who was supposed to be the one actually holding.
Although in an ideal position, the person that needed to give you the feedback was the one supposed to be also officially recognized as power. So that was a problem, because like otherwise you don't try to avoid and circumnavigate the supervisor. I think the normal stance, like you will actually talk to him.
And I think this opens up another subject, as in if there's a hierarchy, but the members of the hierarchy lose track of what's the interest of the project or the company, then now they either open up and understand and change their politics or their way of working, I guess, or in practice the company will have to subvert hierarchy either by letting these people go or changing the hierarchy, moving them somewhere else, or just unofficially bypassing them. And it was a pretty gentleman-like solution to bypass them this way. In a way, they could have, they could have just said, you go, you don't get it, you go. But instead, they let them stay there.
In a way, also that situation is quite obvious when you went now on your first day, maybe, but on your second and third, I think like there are a really strong sign of like who you shouldn't talk to if you want to get something sorted, for instance. Like then maybe even if that person is in charge, maybe like you should just like ask to another person in the same team. And I think like that is quite, it becomes quite apparent. So like I know the hierarchy, but it's like actually something you can probably just by talking to people you can find out really easily. And it's more like those unofficial talks and those informal talks that give you like this idea.
So we go back to networking, the thing we discussed last week,
Yeah.
right? But at the same time, I remember when on my first jobs, guys, I didn't have the faintest idea of politics. I mean, I understood that there was a hierarchy there, but as somebody who just had to animate scenes, I didn't know politics was even a thing. I could have worked for months without even realizing there was anything in place.
Well, when you are like the last wheel of the cart, the decision and the games of politics, they don't really affect you because you don't have any power that you might lose. You might gain some, but I think that's why when you go higher in the hierarchy, you spend more time dealing with shit rather than doing your actual work, because you also need to manage your position and keep that solid and make your and give a reason to the people under you and above you to still validate your place there. Because if you become somehow obsolete, or you don't do your work, or you become you're annoying to some other people, you like, for example, that supervisor that you were told to skip. So that person, like that's clearly a glitch in the system, because that person is being paid to just be there. He probably had other roles, but like one of the things he was paid to do, he was completely skipped because he wasn't functional in that position. And when like collectively you decide to not communicate that, that's a political decision, because communicating that would have consequences and a ripple effect of emotions and meetings, and people will be pissed, and those people that are pissed will concur for you not to gain more power in the future, or so it's a very fine balance. It's not, I don't think it's evil. It's like the same politics that you have in the group of friends you had when you were like 19. But now it's these kind of dynamics are connected to your monthly wage. So
yeah, and they have a cost on the project.
Yeah,
Yes.
eventually they do. Yeah.
Somehow though, it's surprising how many people don't want to do like conflicts and create conflicts, obvious conflicts. So sometimes these things drags for quite some time.
Yeah,
and this is just for their benefit, mental health, I guess, like of people that don't have to deal with the conflict or fire someone. And it's only when it becomes really, really problematic that I've seen like a proper person getting fired or being told off. I think mostly getting fired though, because again, being told off would imply like even a major conflict, because you have to discuss things and then work with this person.
I've witnessed similar things for which people who wouldn't quite fit into a company were very gently patted, I would say, to make them notice that the thing wasn't working. But I realized that there was rarely any open conversation about that until eventually the contract was let to expire. So and I don't quite agree with this way of working, because I mean, if there was a possibility to change the dynamics, maybe one should take it. But I understand that it's not an easy feat.
I think one should wonder, like, what's the benefit of keeping these people around or not having this conflict, and what's the cons of not keeping them around. And I think if you balance the pros and cons, like you could find like maybe like keeping a person in that position and that only gets in the way, it might create a lot of distress throughout the company, and maybe it's not that valid as a reason. But I think it's difficult to calculate that sometimes.
That's why a lot of companies nowadays, even when they do their interview process, even for a technical job, they get HR people to scan the person before you get as a technical artist you are evaluated, because they want to know if you stick to the company culture. Because being sticking to the company culture, like being compatible with the company culture, often means that you will play fair within the company politic game. In the wide sense, like you will be collaborative, you won't be an asshole, you don't have your hidden agenda to just get into the company because you want a stamp on your curriculum, stuff like that. It doesn't. I was very surprised some years back when I was working at Labster, because we were in search for 3D artists. I don't remember of which role. I think juniors. It was very hard to get any curriculum out of HR. I knew that they were looking for people, but they would basically submit people to me after they were passed the HR test, like the company culture. And I was wondering, like, what's the point of this? Because why would I care if a person has the right company value compatibility if they suck as artists? But then I understood, because like the drama that then that happens if somebody is not good, is a good team player, for example, is much worse than having somebody that doesn't know exactly how to UV unwrap. Because UV unwrapping is something very technical that you can learn in an afternoon. But like not being an asshole is something that it takes years to reprogram out of your head. And so it has a cost, like the retraining of those aspects of your personality, or like the way you handle conflicts, that it's still part of politics. It's much more expensive from the company perspective to take care of. That's why often the people get fired, not because they did a lazy job, but because like they had like how do you say, a rage. They had like a rage outburst, or they wrote like a very bad email, or they're not consistent with their opinions, stuff like that. So
okay, that didn't happen. I mean, no, I did see an angry email, but like I think it didn't happen that people were really angry or had a bad personality in that terms. But I definitely had situations where people weren't fitting in the small society of the studio, and you could see like their performances were really low, even if they weren't like it's not as if they were ignorant of the job, but their performances were really low because they weren't involved in it.
I think while doing research before this stream, one of the terms that pinged around the internet more often than not was competent jerk. And the idea that one could be very competent but a jerk, and that nobody wanted to work with this person, regardless of the fact that this person was really, really good. And that's something we discussed in one of our previous streams, if you remember.
Having said that, though, I think like I'm not against the professional jerk, as in I really appreciate people's personality, professionality. So like if they are professional and they're a bit of a jerk, I might try to get along with them anyway and try to get them to work, because I appreciate their skills. But it's a skills that probably as a supervisor, I think you need to have a really high patience. I think like for a lot of personality, there is like a management training that I did. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. I'm raising my hand, so you can take your time. But I have something to ask.
I did like a management training. It was really short, but basically one of the things that came out is that like every person has some people that are more relatable to you, and it's easier to talk to them. And then there are people that you're really far off, and you never understand each other's, and you need to make an effort. And there are sub-personality that could just try to get more along with different personality and trying to connect more than others. And I think like if you are in charge, you are a supervisor, you need to try to be a bit more flexible. So you can't just say this person, I hate it. You need to try a bit more.
I was wondering, because you said not being a jerk, but like, have you ever asked yourself if somebody thought that you were the competent jerk? I ask myself to myself very often, because like those competent jerks, I don't think they go home and say, "Yeah, today I've been I've been perfect as a jerk." Like I don't think they know. And it's like maybe for some time they're jerks, like they are perceived as jerks because everybody say they're jerks. So it's a little bit black and white, and it's always nice to paint a person and like make it the jerk of the studio. So I wonder like how many times without knowing I was a jerk, I was a competent jerk, but nobody ever told me. So I'm not saying that I wasn't. I'm sure that at some point in my life I was. It's impossible. Like, how do you fall into that P trap of being the jerk? That's what I wonder the most.
I don't know. I think like Max, I think like there is actually, I mean, in my head, you're right. I mean, there's no black and white, but in my head, I have a really specific and clear examples of professional jerk. And in my head, there was nobody in the company that would think otherwise, because they were constantly jerk. So because it was a constant thing, and it was really difficult to deal with. It's not a jerk in the terms, I mean, like, just to say more plainly, it was just difficult to get to talk to them and to approach them. So it was a constant thing. It's like, I think people are forgiving, as in, if you being a jerk one day with one person, it can happen that that's just one off, or it happens every now and then. I think it's more of a constant thing that makes you a professional jerk, because you always have really difficult personality, I think.
Man, I think I've always been so lucky with people at this point, because I have nobody that I recall that was like, that guy was or that girl was, they were jerks.
There are not many. There definitely are some, but there are not many. And
I think you don't necessarily. I think there aren't as many as one would normally imagine there are. And also, I think everybody has their low moments in life, in which maybe there's an outburst or something similar to it. And at the same time, I think if one wanted to categorize the poor professional jerk, maybe one way to put it down is someone who are very good at doing their job, but they also know they're very competent, but the way they approach people, or they make themselves approachable, or rather they don't, makes it difficult for other people to talk to them. And I was watching a video in which this person was interviewed about teamwork, and the point they were raising was, how do you make people who work with you feel, and how do you make them perceive themselves as they talk to you? So maybe the competent jerk plays a role in there. But to bring it back into a little bit into politics, I think one of the elements of politics being situational awareness, so knowing what goes on around you. Maybe the competent jerk is not completely aware of what goes around him or her in terms of social interaction. So maybe that's the biggest issue there.
Without abusing the terms, I think it's a sort of autism, as in, like, you perceive really well your job, but you don't perceive so much the people around you, which is like, I mean, you can laugh about it, but it's actually true. It's actually they are people with low social skills, which is not, it doesn't mean that they're jerks as in they hate everybody. It's just that the way they approach people is not maybe the way to build a nice alliance, or
which feeds back to the fact that to retrain somebody in this situation takes a lot more time and effort.
Good luck with that. Yeah, no, it's not about training in that case as well, because they also need to.
And in the chat we have Brain Grip Animation, who says that people can't escape their nature, regardless of the nature of their job, which in a way feeds back into what Max was saying.
There is but. If I can interrupt you just a second, the but is that actually even people with like really bad personality, or that have problem with social skills, like they might fit well in a company if their goals meet the like basically it's parallel to the company's targets. So if your goal is the same, you might get along even if this person is really.
In fact, one of the elements I think of the power structure of a group, also the political threads of a group, is that every group contains diversity of perspectives, so very different opinions within and very different skill sets. And in a healthy environment, if you want to drive this group somewhere, and here's when politics come into the picture, you will need to negotiate the diversity of perspective. And also, you need to be aware that you have a scarcity of resources, right? Max, what do you say?
Oh, I can jump in. Now, what I wanted to, it just came to my mind. Oh, sorry, sorry for you see me
No,
munching
we
stuff
don't
like.
see it
Oh,
actually.
you don't see it. It's a
It's
magical pot
erased.
from outer space. Look at this. It's
Yeah.
amazing. I'm having my dinner. It's basically just peanuts. So sorry for keeping munching on this. No, when you were talking, Amedeo, what came to my mind was this experience that I had not many years ago. And I realized that sometimes companies they need those jerks because those jerks sometimes have those skills that come from their jerk being jerk. It's the same psychological profile. Take a person. I had an experience with a person that had like a extremely obvious narcissistic personality disorder, and working with this person was extremely challenging. Uh, and I would never have hired this person in my own company. But on the other hand, that person would have murdered people in order to be successful and make the company successful.
Oh, okay.
Because like if you're driven by there are some instincts, some kind of characters that they strive for success for their own for the sake of their own ego so strong that they also come with like an extremely appealing personality, an extremely appealing charisma that can also like appeal people around them. He wasn't the kind of person that was a fit for me because I could see through the um, out through those dynamics. But I'm sure that that person would be extremely successful in life and in his job.
Yeah, but I think
He will
here
he will leave he will leave a probably he or she will leave a trail of dead bodies behind.
and and here's the problem. I mean, we have seen that the definition of politics has one which is about the art and science of governing a group, another one which is about some sort of uh, self
Promotion?
validation in a way, self promotion. So I think one of the problems you have in a team in CG, for instance, is when a supervisor is so bent over succeeding that the whole team underneath is going to be the tools and the bodies for this success to happen. And that's when even juniors get a feel for politics.
Like when you do overtime.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
this fits with that very popular illustration of like the boss and the leader, where the boss is the guy on top of the block of stone, leashing the slaves in front of him, while the leader is a guy in at the front of the slave row, pulling the block with the other guys.
So, yes,
it goes down. It trickles down that way. So I think in my personal experience, when there is someone who is too self-driven and they lost track of the project itself, of what the project means, and how what does it mean to get this project done, then that's where even it's very difficult to change things, because you went into an area where this person is not responding anymore.
I think there is a problem as well with I think this is comes with promotion. So I think if I'm thinking about CG, the people that get promoted usually are the ones that are more capable at the job, but they're not necessarily more capable at managing people. But because if you get someone managing that doesn't know how to do the job, you feel like, oh, maybe that's a bigger problem. Sometimes is overlooked the fact that someone that you put in power can be an amazing artist, but being really crap at dealing with people, and that becomes a huge issue.
You're raising
And
your hand because you're that person over there. You're like, hey, it's
maybe
me.
who knows? No, I just want to intervene because one of the recommendations I have at the end of this call actually mentions that, and mentions that tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So you can promote someone who is very good at their job, but it doesn't mean they're good in managing the strategy of the whole team or the group. and their value, this moment of shine in which you see how professional they are, is actually the beginning of the end, if you see what I mean, because they don't have those leading skills yet, those political skills, or even the social interaction abilities that one would need to manage a team. So, and it feeds back, and it's from Max. This quote is from, I think, the 5th century.
Five Rings.
I think it's something similar, though. We'll get to it later.
But then, since you mentioned this, since you're like a sucker for history and battles and war, you should explain to people at home what's the difference between strategy and tactics.
Oh, maybe I should open up the dictionary.
Oh, wait a second.
No,
I think I have it.
tactics is on the short term. Strategy is on
yeah.
the long term. So the tactics is what happens in a battle, and strategy is what happens within the war in
Yes.
short terms. Yes.
Yes, I think Max is hitting the nail on the head. Strategy would be a much longer term plan, while tactics is how you get there step by step, I guess, or what's the method you plan to achieve that strategy. So there is also a reverse quote for the fact that if you have a strategy but you have no tactics, that's the slowest route to victory, because you have a very big plan and it's all wonderful, but you don't have the skills or the small steps to get there. So in practice, you might get there, but it's going to take forever. So you will always need, and that feeds back into what Francesca was saying, I guess, for which you will always need a bit of everything in a group. I think you need that diversity of perspectives, and as Max said, sometimes the competent jerk may be one step into the tactics, if you think of it. Maybe not the strategy, but possibly the tactics. And in general, I think, going back to situational awareness, I think it would be good for people in a production or in a team to have a network within the team that informs them of where, say, for instance, let's make an example. If I am an animator, which departments depend on my work to function, and which department I depend upon to function, for instance. And I think that's something that, for juniors, you may be able to work like that without even knowing that. Okay, you may be able to work and without even knowing
You
that.
still need to know a couple of people.
But if you, and this probably is something we would need to reserve for a teamwork discussion, another stream. But if you want to really understand how things work, if you want to really do a great job, in my opinion, both at a technical level and at the social level, I think you need to develop that social awareness. You need to develop that network that extends both higher up and lower down. And one of the reasons why you need to do that is because the way you change things in a big group is often by exercising some sort of influence that happens through the network. If you just stand up and say, do the way I tell you because I tell you,
yeah, it doesn't really work.
It doesn't really work.
Even especially the juniors, you got the random junior that just becomes like your worst enemy. And if you do that, you will find like the super knowledgeable junior just there, keep asking like, but why can't we do this instead?
Yeah, one of the hardest thing to learn, I think, especially when dealing with juniors, is that, or in general, being a supervisor, sometimes, even if something that is there that you don't really like, you still should like compliment. If it's a minor thing, just say, "Oh, that's great," and focus and basically pile up your bonus for having things fixed for what really matters. Like, I usually let sleep like small things, and
yeah.
I avoid being too picky on stuff. It's not because I'm sloppy. I try to hold up that red button that I can press for, like, no, this really needs to be changed. Because if you keep asking people to fix stuff, like for every small details, they will lose the perspective of what really matters. So, okay, like that sausage on the floor, I know it's like literally the same, it's parallel to the wall, and that will never happen in reality, but it's fine. Nobody's going to look at that. But like that door that goes into nothingness when you open it, that probably you should change it. So, and yeah, so the idea that they get is like, okay, this person is not crazy picky, so I need to scan every time he asks me to do something because he's just picky. So you let something go, and you also build a good relationship like that, because you don't ask, you're simply not annoying to people. Then if you are in a perfectionist environment, things are different, but that's not the kind of environment I like to be, because
But
I don't like to
also, I
waste
mean,
time.
we going back to what I said earlier on, you always are in an environment where there is a scarcity of resources. So I think nobody really can afford to be extra picky. Even if you watch Pixar movies where you would imagine that Pixar doesn't have a scarcity of resources, even when you watch those movies, you realize that there is a priority that was followed when approaching certain tasks. And this is more evident in the older movies where the techniques also had their shortcomings than it is in the modern movies, but it's still there as a thing. You can still see it. And Max, going back to your red button and going back to my same recommendation from earlier on, the recommendation says fight not unless it's critical.
But it's true,
I
because
agree. I agree.
every feedback creates a conflict, even a minor one. So you only want to really have a good reason for it, and then you want to pull it up when it's necessary. And the director I was working with, like up until January this year, he actually told me once, like he said, sometimes some people don't understand that as soon as you ask for a fix, you're not gonna get it really well done, because the fix is already something that people don't want to do. So as soon as you have to ask for something that's really meaningful. Don't ask for something that's, I agree with Mark. Don't ask for something that's really minor, because people are gonna get tired, and also their motivation goes low. And if the motivation goes low, then it's like with a donkey. You have to pretty much pull them up, and it's like, and this is really difficult for a supervisor when you have to literally carry them.
And it becomes another job too. I mean, it's often more difficult to do that job than to do the supervising job. And also, I want to remind people listening to us that this stream was born. This particular subject was picked because we received a question last time that triggered this whole politics things, and I thought it was interesting because one thing that you are taught in schools when you study animation or CG is how to do the job. But very rarely there is, in my opinion, the possibility to teach people these kind of dynamics, and to at least to make them aware of this kind of dynamics, which is something that I try to do in class anyway, because I think it's important, and because myself, I was that junior that comes up with brilliant ideas on how to solve things. And who is complaining about why things don't change when it's so easy to change. And maybe I'm talking to, I mean, you never know who you're talking to anyway. So I would be the one who was talking without situational awareness. And maybe I still am. Ooh.
But you see, I think like if you go to the right person and you say this doesn't work, that's actually great, because you could potentially make a favor to the entire company. I think the only problem is where what you're saying is coming across as a complaint without like a solution to it. Because in a studio, you want to build your credibility, and your credibility is also based on the fact that you're one person that can solve a problem in the company and improve it, rather than just complain.
And going back again to what you just said, if you really, the best experience I've had in changing stuff is going, first of all, look around and listen and see where you are and where are the people, what are they doing, and then get to know people from the department above, the one you depend upon, and from the department underneath, and understand their priorities, see what they really need. I mean, Max was saying, if it's not critical, we don't fix it, for instance. See what does it mean for them, critical or not critical. I mean, as an animator, you may know what's critical to you in your scene, for instance. But for the people underneath your department or next to your department, those that provide you the work you work upon, what does it mean to be critical? And in this process of investigation, of getting information, you will know people. And as you know people, you will also establish a network, and you approach them with the purpose of knowing and learning. And I think, I mean, nobody is going to turn you down just because you want to learn something. In fact, more likely than not, they will be happy to know that there's someone from another department who wants to know how everything works. And this means to them automatically that they will have less technical troubles coming from you, right?
I think
So
sorry.
that's the beginning, I think, of a possibility of change.
One of the major problems sometimes is when people address the wrong department for a technical issue. And one of the sources for this is that people don't understand necessarily too much of what's going on in the other departments. While what people communicate with the other departments, sooner or later you will know what kind of things you can ask to them and what is not their expertise. And I think that creates a much better environment. I think one of the things that was really frustrating on a certain project was actually that people would ask things to a department that was not involved, like a rigging when it was modeling, and that creates a massive amount of request to the wrong department.
I think that you brought up the right word. The problem is the department. By definition is a division of something.
Yeah.
So they ran this experiment. I would probably I will find the link if you want to hear more about that. But they basically got a bunch of kids and put them into a summer camp, and they let them play at their playground, etc. And then after a week, they got another bunch of kids inside the same summer camp, right? So they started perceiving each other as two different tribes. Okay. And they got competitive, and they got really they started organizing like a tournament of basketball or whatever. There was like a lot of competitiveness. They started like boycotting each other, playing jokes to each other, etc. And the observer, like the psychology that was behind this, we were like somehow helping to foster this competitiveness just because they were there before, or just because they felt that they belonged to a different building, like the guys from the building B. Until at some point, the people organizing this test, they put this bus. This bus was supposed to bring the water to the camp for the week, and the bus broke along the way. So all the kids they had to figure out together, like the two groups, how to push the bus up to the camp. So they had to associate, and they became best friends forever because they let alone their differences. And the main difference was they got there 1 week before and 1 week later. So it's absolutely fantastic to observe, like in any workplace or any slice of life reality, how easy it is to create teams or tribes or subgroups. Even because they're like, oh, the guys, like the IT guys, are like, I really hate. I understand the reason behind this, and that's also why I don't work in large companies, because I hate when somebody say, oh no, it must be like, the guys from the shader team that don't really give a fuck about this. Where I like, and they imagine them like as nasty trolls, like playing any kind of trick and like jerking off instead of fixing bugs, and it's so infantile and naive to think about like the work structure this way, because it creates like I think as humans we are literally, well, this experiment demonstrates it. We are instinctively drawn to see the division aspect of things, while it's simply you need to create actual exchange between those groups to make them work. You need to bring one person to the meetings, like put them into each other's shoes, so they understand they're actually part of. That's why they do these team buildings events in companies. And hopefully, I don't know how they do them, but I hope they try to mix teams, because otherwise it's a tribe shrinking event rather than a team building one.
Riggers versus animators.
I think
riggers versus animators.
Good luck.
it's like, yeah, supervisors versus, I don't know, whatever. Like it is the same sort
But
of,
if
I don't know.
Yeah.
if you get to know, I mean, I talked about departments because if you walk into a company, that's what you will have to contend with, in my opinion. I mean, you will see departments in most companies anyway, but imagine that you get to know, as I said earlier on, the upper source of your work and the lower source, the lower destination of your work. Then through capillarity, you're actually infiltrating the barrier between the departments, and to you at least, and for all the people involved in this exchange, you and all the people you talk to, that department is no longer a department. They
Yeah.
just, all they have is a connection with you.
I had a very nice experience working on the last project I worked on, a famous cyberpunk game, where it's set in a cyberpunk setting. It's very, there are many games out there,
Of course.
of course. We started working, we started communicating to each other because of the pandemic, completely through Slack. So we never met anyone in person, and all the communication was done to Slack. And I got to speak with like dozens of people every time, and the channels were they were like general channels that were extremely big with hundreds of people inside. And it was super cool because you had no idea if that person was a supervisor or a director or an art director or the last people on the chain. It didn't really matter. You asked a question and somebody would answer. And it was so cool not to see people like, oh, go to to this guy because he's the head of, or like he's the person responsible of. It was just like, talk to Michal Jazenic, whatever Polish, whatever European, Eastern European family name you can come up with, because they were basically stripped of their role, stripped of their department. So it was like a kind of like, in my imagination and everybody's imagination, was a kind of like a flat hierarchy where everybody was contributing. You couldn't see the closed doors of the offices, the corridors with the different areas. It was just like a big bunch of people. You would throw the stone and they will answer. Yeah, so I think that really helps to dispel this thing.
I'm actually, I mean, I have some personal concern about the flat hierarchy for just a reason. I mean, I like the idea that one doesn't need to always say, oh, I'm the director, I'm this and this. I think I like the idea that everybody can contribute to it. I think it becomes sometimes, when people try to enforce it in a company, it becomes sometimes difficult, because then when the hierarchy disappears, that's the time where sometimes it's really hard saying like you need something to be done. And that's why, for example, the supervisor of the department is responsible for that. In the flat hierarchy, sometimes
Oh yeah, I understand, but that it's not that the hierarchy disappeared. It's just the communication wouldn't follow the hierarchy structure. The communication was reaching directly the person. And we all knew, like sometimes a guy will say, sorry, I need to talk with my supervisor for that. Okay, no problem. But the perception in your mind that you don't have like to go through like different bosses to reach some point, it helped things a lot.
It's like a forum.
I agree. Yeah.
It's like a forum, an online forum.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I worked for a company that tried to use this system called holacracy. It's like a flat. It tried to flatten the hierarchy. It was a big deal in the startup world a few years back. A lot of like large companies, like those phenomenon companies like Zalando or YouTube, like they started using this tool that is basically a way to structure roles and communication within a company that defies the usual structure of hierarchy, like who is in charge for the department, that is also has people in charge of the juniors and so on. And basically it's like people don't have leadership role, but they own certain aspect of the project, Like I'm in charge of this and that, but it doesn't mean that I'm gonna give order to this and these people. I'm the person that so there are alternative systems to that, but I don't think they ever actually made it into the um, let's say that they never became mainstream because they're extremely cumbersome to operate. Uh, like a pyramid scheme hierarchy has been there since the dawn of mankind, and it has a reason. It might be not be the best when it comes like to when it comes to feelings and helping a person finding his place in life, but they're effective. That's why they're using it in military, because otherwise they're trying to minimize your chance of dying. So they try to organize it with you always know who's the person you have to relate to. You don't have to go and consult a map of roles to find out who the hell is in charge of like rigging the characters.
Mhm. I have to say that whenever you look into organizations where the purpose of saving life is observed as a prerequisite for any decision, that's where you will find the slimmest structures, the most efficient ways of working, at least as far as they can be conceived, of course. So I agree that there's something into the military system that is possibly positive for the CG industry as well, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Especially considering how big the teams are in the CG industry, and how big is the fallout of a decision in the CG industry. I mean, the decision to shoot a movie in a certain way has a potential snowball effect on thousands of people down the line, and every one of these people needs to be paid. And this means that the budget may go from 10 to 10x. And that's a problem, of course.
I wouldn't like. I think it's very hard to compare the two. Like the creative industry, let's call it this way, and let's call it like the life saving, or like the companies that like deal with lives, because we can say the military or ER. I think also like the ER is probably structured like the military. I don't think they spend too much time dealing with how people feel about shit. They just like, you are in charge of this, and you're gonna have this shift, this and this at this and this time, and that's it. Because they need to be efficient, and those also they are the most brutal jobs line of work out there, like to be in the first how you call it ER in English, the first primo soccorso,
First aid for
first aid, or like
emergency services, you could call them.
Exactly.
Emergency.
In the meantime, in the chat, someone is asking, what do you think about applying teal organization in a film environment? Now, I don't know what teal. I'm going to show it on screen because I found something on Wikipedia. By the way, remember, for everybody who's joining us, by the way, thank you very much. Remember, you can ask questions in Italian, in English, and in Spanish, and ask questions because this whole conversation started from a question. So it seems that this teal organization is an organizational theory that advocates enabling workers' self-management and to adapt as an organization grows. So it seems to me that it gives people the ability to pick work, I guess, or pick priorities.
So basically, everybody is self-managing himself, and they do. I mean, I don't know. Like, yeah, do they have like a list of a to-do list that's given to them? What's the?
I would imagine that there is only a main list, and they can pick up what they want. But
I'm thinking now, like this is really basic. Sorry, it's off the. But I'm thinking about those companies where you become a vendor and you have to sell your own product and make your own business going, and then you
the
get
pyramid schemes. You mean?
Is that
pyramid scheme is something different though. The person who asked is also making a point. They're saying Valve operates that way, and I think now I know what you mean, Tomek. Thank you very much for the question, by the way. So many years ago, Max, do you remember that the employee handbook of Valve was leaked to the web, or well, it was presented as?
Yes, I remember that.
The idea
of Tomek too for letting us know about it. I will.
Yeah,
look
in
into
fact, it's I think it's very pertinent. So the Valve organization, as far as you could assume from that book, if it was true, of course, is that desks had wheels, and if people wanted to join a project, they would just move their desks to the group of people they wanted to work with, and they proceeded with the work with that group, and then once they lost the interest, they would just move away. So the company had certain goals that were overarching, so to speak, but people could decide which group to work with, and they could move freely about. And at the time, it was hailed as the ultimate management system, of course. And in practice, I mean, Steam is what Steam is today. Probably
Yeah, but
because of
like
that
ask
approach.
yourself, is it still? Are they still using that organization today?
Hmm.
Because those kind of organization, I would say they work perfectly when there must. I'm not an expert, okay, but I have the hunch that this kind of like self-organizing and tribal kind of system, like very natural kind of system, uh, they work amazingly under a certain amount of people. And then the physics of human interaction and human biology and the response time and the space occupied and how fast you can jump from one meeting to the other and how many people you can manage in your head simply start to work against this kind of extremely free and elastic kind of organizations.
Yeah. Also, what happened when nobody wants to join a specific project and needs to be done?
Well, you will assume that that project is not the kind of project the company should engage with.
But what if then in the company, like you don't have a choice and you have to take the job, otherwise you need to fire people? How does it work? Because like this is one of the things that happens in companies.
Yeah, but this is a very good point, because that's what I would say. Let's say that you have a company, you're a manager of a company, and you decide, okay, this year we need to make an animation. Let's say an animation about penguins because they're trending a lot. And like you have like this free organization of a company, and you say, okay, animators, organize yourself. I like you to come up with a concept about a penguin animation. And like at the end of the day, out of your 30 animators, like 2 had like a quick chat about penguins, and nobody actually else gave a fuck about that. Then you should ask yourself, like, am I in the position of pushing all my company to do a movie, or shall I push my company to do a movie that they don't give a crap about? I don't think you should. And then if management comes out like, no, we really need to do this because it's trendy this year, well, of course, you can decide to do it and it might be successful. But then you are not an indie company anymore. You become like a company that is pushing out blockbuster. You will have like hundreds of employees, and these kind of organizations won't probably work anymore because they cannot take into account what people feel about stuff.
I think that for film production, this approach may not work. I mean, it may work. It might work for when you have to decide maybe a subject or an idea, but in organized production, I mean, I imagine animators fighting for the best shot for their show reel. I imagine people saying, "Oh no, I'm not going to do wire removal and green screen removal." No way. And or denoising the plates that come from the set. I'm not going to do that because I don't like the job. They just move their desk away. I imagine that, and I imagine an entire roto and prep department being empty, just with tumbleweed floating, rolling into the department.
If anything, like what makes me think, like you can create a hybrid company. So as in every company is to survive needs also to take on board some kind of jobs. I mean, I'm talking about CG and TV now, and like you might need to take on board like jobs that are not particularly appealing. So probably like where the job is not creative, you probably can have a military structure, as in things needs to get done, and
for production,
in that case you will know when things will be done, because it's really the things about the military structures, and that you do know better what to expect, what will be the outcome, and when things will be delivered. While when you want the company to be pushed forward, as with innovative ideas, you can create probably the flat hierarchy in that group of people, because that will push them more to create creative ideas and to have their own opinion and to put on board something that's more personal, as in, I have this idea, I think it's gonna work, and I think you can build a studio with both of them.
Take Apple, okay? Let's take like the archetype of company that is known to be innovative, or like considered innovative. I'm sure that like in those parts of the company, in those departments that have to be innovative, they probably don't have a hierarchical structure inside the creative department for, I don't know, the design of my mobile phone interface. Maybe people are rolling around with their desks and joining meetings whenever they can, dressed up as clowns, while like bouncing balls on top of their head, while in the other room there's people playing board gaming while they discuss the next chip to put on their phone. But if you observe the structure, the company at the higher scale, you still like have the business administration. You have like the pyramid start to show. At the end of the day, you have like at the bottom of it, you got like the companies with like tens of thousands of employees in China putting together those chips, and nobody's going around with skateboards trying to decide if today they're going to put the chip on the motherboard A or the camera on the motherboard B. So I think the hybrid works while you have a company this big, that you have like sub companies on the top that can behave like that. Or when a company is small enough that you know everyone, so you have this feeling of ownership that allows you to be sometimes maybe do these green screen cutout shitty job. Correct me, I don't remember the name of the rotoscope. Yeah, because like, okay, in a company of 10 people, if I ask you to do rotoscope, you know that there's a reason behind it, and we probably share the same amount of stocks of that small company. So if I ask you to do that, it's not because I'm an asshole, you know me. But in a company with hundreds of people, when you get an email telling you to do rotoscoping, you don't know the person that sent you that email, and that guy, he might be a jerk, and he's certainly a jerk because that's
because you don't ask for it.
Yeah, because I think also that's why it's the size of the company counts, because it's the physical, emotional distance between you and the other person that also makes it harder when you scale up. So I think Tomek example, I promise I will go through it because I'm starting my own company, so I'm interested in that kind of stuff. It's probably the kind of thing that work in very specific companies, and if they grow up in very specific departments of those companies.
I think it's a good idea to remember as well. Like if you set up a company and you want to be really creative, you need to just make sure you can afford it. I think in small companies, true that there is. I think you have this flexibility because it's really easy to get maybe for a job like an amount of money that can be reshuffled really nicely among people and time because it's a small management. When the company gets bigger, I think like the creative team is actually sustained by the military structure. So like you have people like working like a little bees, and then you have this creative team that's literally supported economically by everybody else. So it's something also as a big company you will afford, and you are able to afford, but it's something definitely more expensive. You can't ask the creative to produce an idea in one day, but you probably need to ask the lighters to produce 20 shots maybe in a week or something like that. Yeah. It's really different situation.
Yeah, and I think from the perspective of a junior or someone who is not involved in climbing the ladder, if we may want to tell it to say that way, it's not necessarily immediately visible, this issue. I mean, you're just working, you may not even realize why certain things are happening. And again, if you want to know why certain things are happening and if you want to change them, then again, you need to investigate up and down, left and right, and see where you stand and where other people stand. And that will give you leverage. So in fact, if you find, I mean, one of the things I've noticed is that one may find themselves in a company where there is no perceived change in the company, or change is very slow, and you have no influence over things, in which case you have to build an influence. So, and the influence starts from your professionalism, I guess, And then as you investigate the various aspects of the company, you get to know more and more. And the next time there is a conversation about this or that aspect that expands over several departments, so to speak, you may be able to say something that is meaningful because you know all these aspects. So now all of a sudden you are a voice which became competent. And there is something, again, that I read while I was researching this topic, which is about the way we learn things. And in general, we learn by doing stuff, right? But in practice, what you get to do in a company depends also on who you know. Because, I mean, your supervisor will decide, for instance, if you're good enough to do the important shots, if you're an animator, or if you can't be trusted for those important shots, for instance. And I was what you get to do, in fact, is what is determined by someone else. But in practice, what you get to do determines what you will learn. So you have to build a network of people around you so that this network will also determine what you can do. By creating the network, you will learn more stuff. By learning more stuff, you will get to do different stuff that will get you to learn different stuff. So I think in a company, you may decide, sorry, it was a bit confusing. I was trying to get there. I think in a company, you may decide to just go shot after shot after shot and just animate. Or you may also decide, for instance, myself, after a while of doing animated shots, I usually get tired. Usually at the end of a movie, I didn't really quite, I wouldn't want to do another one immediately, so to speak. And in time, I often changed roles or companies because I was looking for an element of novelty, I guess, something new to learn. And one way to learn something new in a company is to get to know people and acquire some competence that you didn't have when you started. What do you think, Francesca?
Yes, I mean, it's when I joined the BlueZoo, like I actually start, I think this after the first year. At first years, I only did compositing, and I know like this repetitiveness of doing all shots was really tiring for me mentally. And then that's when I start talking to people and trying to understand if there was any other department where I could move, or any other things I could do. And I remember even when I was doing compositing, actually one of the things that I was finding to be frustrating in that project, it was really close in departments. So the things that you were saying, Mark, is actually I was trying to fix something from lighting and from modeling, I remember, but you couldn't really discuss these things because they were really closed department, and that was a bit difficult to deal. But this was something that was so clear, so obvious, that then on the other project they made it more free and open. And this is when I start talking to people, saying I was interested in modeling, plus looking at people doing the modeling or doing the shading. And that's where I start learning, and I moved then on modeling. And I remember having the art director behind me that was really good in ZBrush, and I learned a lot from him. Just keep looking and checking. So I think I think if you keep this fluid mentality of even changing a little bit your way of thinking and what you want to do, you can learn a lot. But also people will know that you want to learn, and people will know that you learned that skill. So I think it's always keeping the network open and up to date. I think it really helps in that sense.
It helps your brain too, by the way.
And
Max wants to talk one day about the problem of growing older and maybe the risk of becoming obsolete. And we are going to discuss this in another stream, of course. But I think this feeds back into into this subject. And I think in general, of course, you can learn everything on your own. It's going to take you probably longer because you have to weed out. You're going to have, especially in a job that is so technical as ours, you're going to have to weed out what's really relevant and what's just nerd stuff that you don't really need to have. Mm-hmm. And when I speak about nerds, I always mean it in a positive way, by the way, because I wouldn't even be able to do this stream if it wasn't for people who were really devoted to.
If it wasn't for the fact that we are nerd in the first place about something ourselves.
Yeah, that's also true. But I was trying to give credits to the people who set up this system for us before we came. So in practice, if you want to expertise, comes also from interacting with other people. And I think one of the ways to understand where do you stand, so to speak, politically in a company is to check how isolated you are. Do you know when decisions are taken and how? If you don't know what's going on, if you get to discover it when the decision has been made, if there has been another meeting in which you weren't, in which stuff was decided, and the meeting you're in is to tell you that stuff was decided, then the possibilities are that you are either in a very junior position or you are not part of the network. So decisions are being taken decisions are taken without you, and that may be because you didn't join the network, or because somebody thinks you're not competent enough, or maybe because somebody has an agenda.
You didn't go to the pub.
You didn't
go to the pub. Yeah.
Maybe you didn't go to the pub. So I think politics starts into the network and also ends up there, and influence is something that is exercised through the network again. So we always go back to the network, which is in fact the reason why last week we did a call about networking, if you remember.
Yeah, absolutely. When you were mentioning like the fact that it's good to know what stuff is relevant to you and to have a network that can help you when you need to learn stuff. The example was like the other day when in our chat I wrote, "Hey nerds, do you guys know the fastest way to make a rig?" Of course I could Google that, but if I Google that, I get myself into a rabbit hole of people. I mean, there are millions of answers, and those people, for me, they're not highly ranked in my ranking of who is reliable. But Amedeo Morpai, they're on top of that rank for me. So I ask them, and I have an answer in like literally 3 seconds. So that's why it's important to have a network of nerds.
Yeah, also, I mean, not only they're not ranked in your network, I mean, you don't know them, but you don't even know what are their priorities. Very often when you Google, how do I do a rig, you might get an answer from someone who is in charge of 200 rigs, and then they will give you the answer of the art of rigging. They will tell you how to make a wonderful rig, which will take you about 20 years to master, but maybe all you need is a bunch of joints that don't collapse under the weight of the mesh. So you have to also understand, again, we go back to what we talked about at the beginning of the stream, when we said you need to understand what are the priorities of the people talking to you, because otherwise you don't have a key to interpret what you need to do and how. So in the chat, in the meantime, Fenke is saying, let's just read. I think this also goes hand in hand to why having a good mentality in an artist and the relationship with others is often more important than the skills they have at the moment. I think you're hitting again the nail on the head in there. In fact, as Max was saying, and I would agree with that, it takes much longer to change a person's character than to actually acquire new skills. So
yeah, given how often this topic comes up, I think we should like dig it into stone.
Yeah, we can etch it into stone. I mean,
yeah,
it's probably one of those essential truths you have to go by. And Femke also adds, people will start to trust that you can do something and give you the chances to learn more through those tasks at that stage, of course. Yeah, in fact, if you are dependable, they will trust you a lot more, even if maybe your skills aren't that good. I remember I had an experience in which I was leading a small team, and I was given some people who just joined the company, and I remember some people, you would just give them the task to do, and they would do it. And you would be giving them technical notes, and you would, as Max said earlier, you would just use the red button to fix only the very critical stuff, and then you would know that the next time you saw that stuff, the red button was respected. All the critical stuff was fixed, and sometimes a bit more. And I had no qualms whatsoever recommending these people. I mean, I knew that since they were new to the business, you couldn't give them the mega shot of the zombie apocalypse in a movie. But at the same time, I knew that they would have gotten there eventually anyway. So it wasn't about the skills. It was more about the fact that they listened, they did what they had to do, and they understood. I think they understood the context in which my requests were happening.
With probably with a pinch of initiative, because
Yeah,
that's
with
also
a bit of initiative. I think initiative is so important in general. And another thing is, if you start talking to people and build a network, I found that it works a lot better if there is. I mean, you want to learn, right? And learning happens through doing. It works a lot better, in my opinion, if you do something as well. I mean, if there is an action that goes hand in hand with your words. So that means that you will need to give some time to these people, and like you need to give time to anything that you are growing in practice, because all of your questioning will require time on the other side. It's a good idea to also give time, and that's how collaborations start. I mean, you give some time, they give some time, and eventually you found yourself working together on something. So I think that's a requisite, and you should probably, in fact, it's something worth considering most of the time. You need to give time to anything. You need to do something there. And I guess I'm thinking if there is anything else that we haven't touched yet on this. I mean, there is so much to be talking about, but in general, we if you think of it, we almost never dealt with the negative side of politics today, because I think there's also the fact that politics is a great tool to improve a situation or to manage a situation. So it's much easier when you talk about it in as a way, as an effort, in an effort to understand it. I think it's much easier to try and see how this can be used to improve a situation. If you're describing a job, then it's much easier, I think, to just complain about office politics, I guess, and see the worst side of it. But in practice, I think it's a super powerful tool.
I think if you complain, it might. I mean, you can still complain, and there's surely moments in which everybody has complained about it. But I think, like, if you want to talk through with with a positive, with an open mind about politics, you actually need to see the potential of it. And if you stop seeing the potential, that's when you're probably never gonna get through this social structure, which is any studio.
Yeah, in general, I think complaining about it is anyway some sort of sign. I think you need to acknowledge the presence of a problem before you can do anything about it. And that's something that, for instance, that's something I don't like about the lack of discussion that may happen in certain situations, where it seems to me that we all know in the group that there is a major issue. It's the elephant in the room. Everybody knows that. And in meeting after meeting after meeting, day after day after day, nobody ever discusses it, and still the issue is there. So I think raising at a certain point the ability to be able to raise an issue in a group is important, and the ability also to, I think, the possibility that this issue is being considered seriously and not just dismissed is something that needs to be there for any healthy group to work.
Yeah, you need to be able to dispel those tensions and to avoid them festering and ruining things very often before they get to a point of saturation. But very often it takes courage to step up and say, no, guys, I think this feature, it's not really going where we want, because you cannot be in other people's head. So sometimes, like, you assume that the elephant in the room is the same one everybody's seeing, and also it's that's why I prefer smaller teams, because it's easier to keep track of what everybody's agenda is. So the agenda is the motives, the main motive that justify their action, and allows you to foresee somehow how they will behave in a certain way. Somebody's agenda might be, I just get the money. I just need to get the money in my bank account at the end of the month. because now I have a kid and a family, so this is not my priority. Somebody else really wants to have his name on the top 10 names of a production, or somebody else like they really want to be to find another job, so they're not spending that much time, they're not involved that much anymore in the project. So everybody has a motive, and it's very important to know those motives. Sometimes they are hidden, sometimes they're clear. If you know those motives, you can more easily navigate those tensions and figure out how to what size and what shape the elephant in the room has. But
And
yes,
this makes me think a little bit about, like, because I don't use the word complain. Raise an issue for me is actually different from complain. But now I should see like the dictionary and check it out. But basically, the idea is that like when you complain, you might not necessarily raise the issue well. If you raise an issue, it might be completely unemotional and just completely technical, and just say this is a problem. How do we fix it, and approach it in a room. And I think like one of the things like sometimes people, when they just complain, don't realize is that there are a lot of occasions in meetings where you could say what's wrong, but you don't say it because you think, oh, there is politics anyway, or there is, or nothing is
sometimes
gonna work.
I give you an example how to let's see about this one. Like you're working on a game, and the problem is the level design. Like the animation are great, the code is great, the music is great, the level design sucks. And you have a meeting, and the level designer is there. So when you say, guys, we have a problem, the level design doesn't work, and that person has put like that night and days to work on the thing, you have to take into account an emotional response to that. And most people, they don't want to create that kind of tension, because from like you basically trading product tension for a personal tension, an emotional tension, and it really depends on the people involved.
I wonder though if you can really use the words well and just not saying maybe like the level creative, the levels, the game's levels, it's not like it's not working. You can maybe say like rather than focus on the fact that nothing works, like you probably can work out a way to say, to mention that a few things needs to be addressed.
I think there is no way to say it.
Oh, come on! I know you because you're not diplomatic.
I mean, here, if you analyze what Max said, somebody just worked day and night on something, and they deliver it to you, and they're tired to begin with. They can't see their work anymore because they're tired. You're telling them that doesn't work. So there is no way this can fall down well. As we discussed during the feedback stream, for instance, a better approach could be for this person not to destroy themselves on this work. And so don't do day and night, just do days, okay? And get earlier to the point of receiving feedback. This way, you still are going not to like it, but at least you can go past that hurdle, that psychological barrier for which you are completely unhappy with the feedback.
Yes, but I think like for how you are portraying it now, it sounds like the problem might be also beyond this person, like saying like the work cases, for instance, where an animation in a project wasn't the most creative, most beautiful animation ever, and then when you look into the project, it was actually maybe a animation director that was dying day and night on the project because he was understaffed. So I think there are several, rather than making really personal, as is like your game level, the ones you created, sucks. It might be that you need to investigate the reason behind it, and that becomes already less personal. And I think a lot of the times, if people are capable and they didn't do a good job in that case, in the occasion, there might be a reason for it that's not because they did a shitty job. So I think that this is the things, like as soon as you become empathetic with the person and you say, I realize that you're really tired, there are some things that don't work, but we need to, it might not be your fault. It's just like something else. It's like something that happened and we need to work it out together. It's actually a different approach. So I think you need to isolate the case where the issue is a person itself and where the issue is actually an issue created by the person, but not the person maybe is not even guilty about it. I think it's a complex matter, but I think you can approach it. It's not as you cannot say it. I think if this is the case where it's really difficult to say something, you probably can investigate it a lot before you actually talked about it. You need to probably find a really good solution before you even raise the point.
There may be something in the chat that is feeding back into what you said. Fenke is saying that sometimes complaining might also happen because we are not knowledgeable enough about what is going on. So we can't have a proper discussion about what the issue is because we don't know what the issue is entirely, which is a problem that I think is hitting both management and workforce at the same way. In fact, that's why everybody should know a little bit of everything else, just a little bit. And Francesca, when we were collecting notes about this call, you remember how we found about that information about the kind of networks that one needs to run in order to develop a project and to complete it, for which you need to have an operational network of people that guarantees that the job gets done, and then a network of people who guarantees that you know what's happening around you, what are the risks, what are the threats, where is the potential, and then a network of people who look into the development issues. So how to develop something, where do we develop, in which direction and how. So I think in practice, without information, you're almost blind as you navigate. And if you are a team of 1,000 people without information, then the mistake gets a bit bigger. I remember when I was flying, if you were learning on bigger aircraft, the usual opinion was that the biggest the aircraft and the biggest the impact, because a little mistake on a small aircraft that can change direction very quickly can be solved maybe relatively quickly, but a little mistake on an aircraft that takes 10 seconds to react is going to have a consequence and is going to be big usually. And then we have in the chat, I'm a bit speeding because I want to get to the recommendation because it's time. And in the chat, Numako says that what they have learned is to figure it out and don't complain, because nobody cares about what you're going through. They just want to get the work out of the way. I think Numako, you are a bit pessimistic there. I think very often the feeling one gets in a production that nobody really cares is more a result of the impersonal nature of a big production rather than the active nonchalance with which people treat other people. I think there isn't, as Max was saying earlier on, there aren't shading artists in a room saying, haha, we are going to make an evil shader so that lighting and compers are going to make something that is never going to be rendered. Ha 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 ha. I don't think that's the way it's happening. I think the fact that people don't talk to one another makes it easier for people to ignore other people's needs and problems. And I think this has been proven scientifically. There was that experiment in which they would put two people in different rooms, and then they told one person to administer electric shocks to another person. And they found out that if there was a wall dividing them and then no screams could be heard, then the person administering would be more likely to administer those shots. And
no shit, really?
Yeah. It's a really true story. It's like there was a lot of like social behavior that you don't realize how wide they are when you put people in position, power, and
in practice, if you think of it, you are less likely to treat badly people you deal with regularly, because you meet them regularly, right? You don't want to wake up in the morning every morning and start the day with a war, right? This is
the reason why politics.
It's a drama of humanity. The fact that if you are separated from a person, you don't really care. Like, we know that people die in wars every day. We still are able to sleep, and they die by the hundreds every day. But if we have a friend that is in the hospital, we don't sleep. Why? Because we have a connection with it. Even if it's a person that we don't know that well, that still counts more than hundreds and thousands of people that we don't have a clue about. So if I know that my job is going to a person that I had a beer with the other day, I would be less likely to do a lousy job and like let something slip and cause that person a potential burden, because I can now humanize that person. Like I see that person, I see it as a human being that has troubles on its own. He has a girlfriend at home that maybe is mad at him because the other night he came back home drunk. So because he was with me. So it's easier to relate and to be good with people we have a direct contact with. There's no way around that. It's how humans are built.
This is a running joke in the company. I think it's in a lot of company when the modeler says, "Oh, anybody like says, oh, but it can be fixed in comp." And the good thing is actually is that it's done in front of me, so we can laugh about it. But I think it's like a lot of the case. This happens because you think like, oh, it will be fixed down the line, and you think like that's not a problem because you don't you're no witness of the problems you caused with your negligence. And negligence is not actually an act of evil, pure evil. It's actually just you being disconnected from the consequences of your actions, and because you think like what could go wrong.
What
So
could
yes,
go
like
wrong?
by you, for instance, keeping in touch with like a modeling and animation, you made them also realize what they sometimes overlooked and what that caused to you. And you don't necessarily need to go there and saying, you ruined my life, but you can make them realize like, look, this actually is a problem for us. Could you do it differently next time? You can't fix the past, but you can maybe make the future better by creating this relationship with them when you are a human being that may be suffering. And you can show that you have a distress. I think it's just not making it emotional too much, because remember, it's a workplace and it's not about you having like a mental breakdown. It's more of about like trying not to make it like to make it too bad, but it's actually like, I mean, you still need to be a human being and trying to not be too emotional in the context of workplace, although you can express that was a bit too much and it was stressful. You can talk about it. Yeah, you can talk about stress. You just don't show it too much.
But in the workplace, there are the priorities usually.
Yeah, and having said that, there are cases of people that maybe burst in cry, like they went to the bathroom and cried, or maybe they cried there in the studios. Like there are cases where people couldn't bear it anymore. Sometimes it's even not working related; it's actually related to their personal life. And it can happen, and we are human. We're not gonna say, "Yo, you shouldn't do that. Just go outside." And we automatically try to be close to them, but you can't use that as for your politics inside the studio, I guess.
I think it's time for us to wrap up, guys. I think it's time for us to go through the recommendations. So again, I mean, with politics, you could discuss for ages. In fact, they did, right, in ancient Greek, in ancient Greece. So I think we could go on forever and ever, and probably we could do another one on this one. So
think about that; they got paid for that sometimes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They didn't have to work because of that. So now, what do you recommend, guys? Anybody wants to go first?
Yes, I mean, I sent you the recommendation a little bit late today. Sorry, I was super busy lately.
It was a board game, right?
Yeah. So if we're talking about politics, I would bring a game called The Great Dalmuti. The Great Dalmuti it's a classic game. It's a really simple game, and I can describe it to you very quickly. It's a card game. It's been around for ages, and it comes with different names. It's like even in Japan, there's a version, an old version of this game. It's literally an historical game. We could call it like that. It's extremely simple. There's like 10 different cards, and the cards have social roles. There's the Dalmuti, that is basically the king, the sub-Dalmuti, that is vice king, and then there's the merchant, the iron worker, and you go down, basically down to the peasant, the farmer, and the slave. There's one card of the Dalmuti and some like 20 cards of the slaves. And you play this card with this game with as many people as you want. Usually it's good to play with 10 people. So it's a great game when you get your post-COVID party, especially in the UK. I know they're very popular right now, looking at the curve. So you should bring like this game, the Great Dalmut. You need to play with a lot of people, and what happens is that you get to basically raise in the social scale of this game by winning over other people. And when you get to the point that you are the Great Dalmuti, you actually order people what to do. It's very simple to play, but it creates like very interesting group dynamics. And because at some point somebody can be the slave, and the Dalmuti orders him to give him his best cards. But when the roles flip, the things will get funnier. So it's very good to create like it's a good team building game for an office. Let's put it this way, because it will get people to interact and also be a little bit mean or good to each other. So in a very extremely simple set of rules, like everybody can play this game in literally 5 minutes. It's a huge classic. If you have enough people to play it, like from 7, let's say 6 to 10 people, just buy it because it's quick, it's really immediate, and it's fun as hell.
It's 6 the minimum then.
I guess it is probably, yeah. I wouldn't play less than 6.
Nice. And Francesca, and your recommendation? What do you?
I've sent you the trailer.
Sure.
So I wanted to recommend this anime since forever. So like now I found it like because we talked about politics. So this is Shinsekai Yori, which is from the New World. It's taken from like a novel, and they did the manga, but don't read the manga. That's completely. But anyway, this is a really interesting story because I'm not gonna spoil even like settling the story is really gonna spoil it. Shinsekai Yori has like a bit of a fluffy design, but then actually the story is about this dystopia. So in theory, it's like a post-apocalyptic village in which there is this utopia of this perfect village. Everybody's happy, and the kids are raised to fit a role in society, which in theory it's perfect from them. But the thing is, like, by creating this perfect society, you do encounter some issues, and the society gets rid of these issues. And the issues can also be some people that cannot fit in the society, and they automatically get taken out of it. So the reason why Shinsekai Yori is actually really nice is because, like, probably is a different way to see politics. It's not as if you need to fight against it, but you can also be part of it, becomes part of it, and change it from within. And I think that's Shinsekai Yori has the story of this arch that goes from like when the protagonist is a kid to when she's reaches the adulthood. And you can see she's fight, and she's more of a revolutionary at the beginning. But at the end, don't want to spoil it, but probably I'm going to spoil it now. At the end, she actually kind of fit in the society, but with keeping in mind that she does want to change it, and she change it from, she start the change from within. So it's an interesting perspective, I think.
Thank you very much, Francesca. And now for me, today I want to recommend the book I was quoting from earlier on with Max, remember? And it's The Art of War from Sun Tzu. So
it's a classic.
It's a classic, and it's such a classic that it's something that people have to read in management classes, as far as I know. And today, when I was talking about, say, for instance, not to fight unless the position is critical, or what was it? There was another. Now I don't remember what I was quoting. There was something that was fitting in the moment, and now I don't remember anymore.
Make love, not war. No, it wasn't that.
No, it wasn't that. One of the reasons why this book is also famous is because at a certain point, the author, who is describing the art of war, says that the greatest victory is that which requires no battle. So since every battle requires expenditure of resources and men and manpower, the real victory is not going into battle and sacrificing resources and manpower, but it's really the one that you win without having to waste too much energy. And I think, if you think of it, the best result with the least amount of force. That makes a lot of sense. And it's a book that is still valid today. You really need to have a look at it because it is really, really interesting. There is another one that says that victorious warriors first win and then go to war. So while the defeated warriors, they first go to war and then they seek to win. So I think it's a good book about planning ahead as well. Although, of course, it was written many years ago. We are talking about the 6th century before Christ. So it's a while ago. And then I have another suggestion that I put it out just for the fun of it. It is actually quite interesting as a text. It's called The King's Mirror, and Max will love it because it is an educational treatise for a king from the 13th century, and it's written in ancient Norse language.
Oh God!
Yes, it's amazing. You can summarize it. I'm not giving it justice, but in practice, you can imagine it as a book that a king leaves to his son, so that he can be educated in the art of politics and being a king. And it passes down some interesting advice, like, for instance, if you kill someone, even if it's your enemy, make sure you don't brag about it, because this person has friends and relatives. Which again goes into the network, the power of network, for instance. And through history, there has been kings who had to defeat a number of political enemies, but that doesn't mean that they defeated the whole party of their enemies. And in fact, after the act, they often tried to ingratiate those parties, to make them friendly towards themselves, just to make clear that there was a logic behind their actions. It wasn't just because they were kings. And I think this feeds back in a way to what Max was saying about having a consistent opinion, or just make sure that if you are a competent jerk, there is consistency about it. You're not just lashing out left and right.
But
So-
Amedeo, I'm very surprised, because at this point you should be talking about our own countryman Nicola Machiavelli.
I know that this was a thing, Machiavelli the Prince, but the reason why I'm not suggesting Machiavelli the Prince is A, I haven't read it all. And then B, Machiavelli wrote the Prince in a state in which he was bitter about the fact that he was being sent away from the court. And I think he was even suspected of treason at a certain point. So I'm not sure that whatever is written there is objective. I think Sun Tzu, for instance, is writing about how not to die in combat and how to win a war, and is a lot more practical in that respect.
I mean, you cannot take the emotions out of an Italian, you know that very well.
I can't, but I couldn't recommend that. And someone is writing Santa Ricotta in the chat.
That is not it's not a thing anyway, and I'm offended. You just offended us. Is that person an Italian person?
I don't know.
Yeah.
We are offended because they should have said Santa Mozzarella.
Exactly.
So, and on this note, guys, I think we can close this call. We can close this stream. Thank you. It was a lot of fun today. And again, remember that this conversation started because of a comment in the chat. So again, thank you very much for that. And remember, we stream every Thursday at 5 p.m. UTC. If you want to join, just come along and like and subscribe on YouTube. And we'll see you next week, hopefully. Have a good night.
Live long and prosper. Bye.
Good night.
Bye-bye.